On three. 1, 2, 3. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and everyone can sit. Okay, thanks. Mrs. Callahan, could you please do the roll call?
Certainly. Mrs. Johnson,
Yes,
Ms.
here.
Weisberg,
Here.
Ms. Bays,
Here.
Ms. Brooks,
Here.
Ms. Epstein,
Here.
Ms. Gilliar,
Here.
Mr. Greenstein.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. One moment, please. I just had to get the TV in the other room turned down a little. I don't know if anybody could hear it, but I certainly could. Okay. Well, good evening and Happy New Year to all. Or as I've been saying, happier and healthier 2021. We've all received Dr. Hines' updates on the number of cases in the school community, including this afternoon when we were notified about 20 more positive cases since yesterday that we learned about. Well, this is part of the increase of COVID cases in New York and elsewhere and was anticipated after the 2-week holiday break. It's still jarring to know that as of today, we have that many more cases among our district staff and student body. Our thoughts are with you. Tonight, we'll be discussing the pressing issues of the moment, and that is, how long and under what set of guidelines can we keep our schools open and our community safe? All of us up here agree that the best and safest place for students to be is in school, provided that we have enough staff and provided that we're able to maintain our safety protocols. Dr. Hines and Dr. Allen will present the current options, and that's actually going to be a new item on the agenda that we'll get to. Dr. Hines and Dr. Allen will present the current options should the Nassau County 7 or 14-day rolling average of cases reach 9%. And for those of you who don't know, as of today, we're at 8.6%. And they'll explain what in-school COVID testing will look like if we need to take that route. We also know that many families at every level are opting for the fully virtual instructional programs. We're happy to provide the FVLP as an alternative, and our administrators and teachers continue to work to improve remote learning in the district. Weber and Schreiber parents, please note that letters requesting you to select an option for your children went out this afternoon. We'll also be sharing some good news tonight. Dr. Hines has mastered Thought Exchange, which is a user-friendly survey tool that will greatly improve communication throughout the district. By participating in the survey process, everyone will have a convenient way to make their voice heard anonymously. We're not only listening, we're looking forward to hearing your input. I don't want to give anything away, but the first survey will be made available very soon. Discussion item 3 on the revised agenda is our partnership with NYU Metropolitan Center's Innovations in Equity and Systemic Change, which we'll call NYU Metro for convenience. We've thought about equity for every student for as long as I can remember. Partnering with NYU Metro is a concrete step towards equity for all. 2 of the board's goals this year, and I hope for as long as needed, are ensuring a learning environment for every student that is inclusive, appreciative of diversity, and anti-racist. This is going to require commitment and resources, but I have great faith in this school district and community that we have the heart and spirit to do the hard but necessary work to make us even better. To anyone watching who has COVID or has a loved one with COVID, we wish you a speedy recovery. If you're on quarantine and watching, thank you for taking care of yourself, your family and friends, and the rest of us by following the guidance. Most of us have COVID fatigue, and some of us have actually gained the quarantine 15. It's going to get harder before it gets easier, and we get back to a new state of normal. However, if we support each other and are kind to each other, we'll get through this together. So I welcome you to tonight's meeting and thank you for tuning in. I am now going to move to adopt tonight's agenda, but we're making one adjustment. We're going to amend the agenda. We currently have 2 discussion items on it, and we're going to add now a 3rd discussion item, which will be Dr. Stephanie Allen presenting on COVID, doing a presentation on COVID testing and the schools and our district response as we see it at the moment. So I think we need to, do we need to vote on that? The resolution, we would just need to vote, or no, if we're amending the agenda?
Why
Or
don't
vote on
we
the amended agenda, I guess.
vote on the amended agenda? Yes.
Correct, yes, thank
So are
Okay,
you
so
going
if
to
you
make
wanna
a
do-
motion, Mrs. Johnson?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at. I'd like to
Okay.
make a motion
And a
on
second?
the,
I'll second it.
Thank you. All right. Mrs. Johnson,
yes,
Mrs. Weisberg,
Yes.
Ms. Bays,
Yes.
Ms. Brooks,
Yes.
Ms. Epstein,
Yes.
Ms. Gilliar,
Yes.
Mr. Greenstein.
Yes.
Thank you.
thank you, Mrs. Callahan. Item 6 is community comments, and as we've been doing lately, since we've been virtual, we will, we encourage comments to come in via email, send them to the BOE at Portnet, and in the subject line, say community comments, so we know that it's something you want read into the record at the end of the meeting. I'd also like to note that we are working on a way, our technology people will be working on a way to do live comments from the community, because we would really like to hear from you vocally and in person, as opposed to the way we're currently doing it. So we are attempting to work that out and looking forward to it. Okay, we have next the report of the superintendents, the enrollment report. If we could have that, Dr. Shields.
Of course, Ms. Johnson. So the last enrollment report was run on the 16th of December, right before we began our recess that we had for 2 weeks. At that point, we had 5,239 students. That's only 2 less students than the previous enrollment report, so it's basically unchanged from the previous report to you.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Hines, did you want to do a opening statement?
Yeah, real quick, if you wouldn't mind, and then I know Dr. Allen and I will have a discussion regarding testing. So the first thing, actually, I'd like to expand on what you talked about with thought exchange. And if I time this pretty well, after I'm done speaking here right now, the whole community will receive the first thought exchange at 8:15 in about 4 minutes. So let me kind of lay the stage, set the stage here as far as what this means, because truly since March we've been talking about soliciting and educing, drawing out feedback from the community and from our staff. Clearly that's incredibly important, and we've been looking at a real surefire way to have that type of engagement, not just with surveys, a traditional survey, but something that's a little more pliable and I will say meaningful. So as a district, we want to stay connected and certainly hear your questions and ideas about moving forward during this extremely challenging and uncertain time. And I think we would all agree that we are smarter and better together. So with that in mind, we are asking you as a community and staff to join us in our first thought exchange. And this is a special and unique two-way process to bring people together on important topics, which replaces the methods used in traditional surveys, like I said before, with a naturally collaborative platform. Some school districts on Long Island are actually using this right now, and certainly throughout not only New York State, but across the nation. And participants are asked to share their ideas in response to an open-ended question. So it's one question tonight. And all ideas are shared confidentially. So please know that when this thought exchange comes out to you, we're not going to, track it down and look to see who actually, sent whatever exchange and whatever thought you may have shared. That is, first of all, that's not the purpose. And second of all, we can't do it. And we wouldn't want to do that. But most important, I will say, Connect Ed is coming out in about 2 minutes. And within that email, you will see a link. And I'm asking you, please, to open up that link. Of course, not during the board meeting, because you want to listen to the board meeting. So either after the board meeting, and you actually have up until Sunday afternoon to utilize this exchange. Now, there will be an introductory video from myself, really outlining actually everything I just said right now. And here's the question that we're prompting our staff and community to engage in. As we continue to operate our schools, what are the most important factors we should consider to keep our schools open, keep everyone connected, informed, safe, and well supported? So as I said before, it'll come out in about a minute, and it's open until Sunday afternoon. And what we'll do is, once this is all wrapped up and I figure out how to share this, not only with the board, but certainly with the community, I'd like to share all of this information with you at our next board meeting at the end of January. And this is something that we will use often, not just to see what your thoughts and feelings are in relation to what's happening right now with the pandemic, but we can certainly use it for the budget. We can use it for curriculum, I won't say issues, but thoughts related to curriculum assessment and everything else that's related to school. So I look forward to engaging you in this new journey of ours, as we now have our own YouTube channel and we are really utilizing social media. Now we're utilizing a totally new platform as well. And so I just want to set the stage with that, because as that exchange comes out, now we're going to talk about, with Dr. Allen and myself, we're going to talk about, well, what's going to happen. And I know there is concern amongst our staff, certainly amongst our community, as far as the rising numbers are concerned. Certainly here in Nassau County, which I think is trailing Suffolk County, but not by much, as far as overall percentage increase, not only over the past 7 days, but certainly over the past 14 days. And as I think most of us are projecting, it will continue to increase post this December break. And the question becomes, and the question I'm hearing more often than not, is if and when are we going to close? Right. So that is the number one question. Now, if some of you listened to Governor Cuomo's, I will say, conversation yesterday with the media, as he does every single day, he kind of changed the landscape again as far as what it means to not only keep schools open. And by the way, toward the end of his conversation, he's saying it's local control, but he is actually advocating for schools to stay open. He believes, and I'm paraphrasing here, that students are safe and staff are safe within the schools. So that is something that I know that as a governor, he would like to see. But ultimately, it is up to the school district if and when we reach a threshold, which I know Dr. Allen will talk about in a few seconds. If once we get over 9% and what that actually means. So with that being said, I want the community and the staff to know we hear what you're saying. I truly believe that our students need to be in school, and we need to exhaust every single option before we think about going to remote. We also have to understand too, when other school districts move to a remote platform for a week or for 2 weeks, it has consequences for other school districts. I'm not saying that's why we should do it or not do it. I'm just saying we are all interconnected here. You know, whether it's Great Neck, whether it's Manhasset, whether it's South Shore School District. We have lots of staff members who live in different school districts. My school district actually shut down this week. And I can tell you, as a parent, you know, you have mixed feelings about when that does happen. So I'm speaking both as a parent and as an educator. I understand the concerns, I really do. But I also want you to know that we are looking at this day by day. We are looking at the data that's in front of us, and we will do everything possible to stay open. But if and when we do reach a threshold, then that's something I will share with the board as far as what my recommendation is concerned with. So I'm going to turn over to Dr. Allen right now so we can get into some of the particulars. And I know that some of our board members will have questions as well. Nora, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just don't want to interrupt the flow, but we're supposed to do one thing before we move on to that. And that is just, I'm going to do item 8, which is make a motion to approve the minutes from the board meeting from December 8th, 2020, and the curriculum committee minutes from December 4th, 2020. And do I
I'll
have a
second it.
Okay.
I'll second.
Mary. Thank you, Emily.
Okay, Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Mrs. Weisberg,
Yes.
Mrs. Bays,
Yes.
Miss Brooks,
Yes.
Miss Epstein,
Yes.
Miss Gilliar,
Yes.
Mr. Greenstein.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Callahan. And I'm sorry to have interrupted that, but I didn't want to leave it out.
No, I appreciate that. I jumped the gun. My apologies. So I'm just going to turn it over actually to Dr. Allen, if you wouldn't mind, Dr. Allen, and we can have this discussion move forward.
No problem. Thank you, Dr. Hines. So you kind of laid the groundwork a little bit. If anybody did hear the governor's press conference yesterday, he did change things for us again. The last change we saw from him back in December with respect to the zones was he added the hospitalization rate. So if you remember all the way back, we talked about the zones and it was about 2 or 3%. You were allocated or designated a yellow zone and you had to do testing. Fortunately, we were kind of ahead of the curve there and did reach out to agencies, and we were in the process of finalizing that contract with House MD to be ready to do testing. But yesterday, the governor said, and it's a little confusing, so we are hoping that the Department of Health is going to come out with some information. I have reached out to them, and I've also reached out to my colleagues in other districts to see if they're getting any information. But what he said was school districts that are in a county that have a positivity rate greater than 9% can remain open as long as they do testing. And in order to stay open, this is where it gets a little confusing, the positivity rate has to be lower than the positivity rate of the community. So now you go from the county rate to the community rate. And when you look at an area like Port Washington, where we have multiple areas, Manor Haven school zone may have one rate to work on, where Daly school zone may have a different rate to work on because you have Manor Haven versus other parts of. So we are hoping that there's going to be a little bit of clarification for us moving forward. But again, we are ready. We have the agency. I'll be ordering the tests within the next few days to send them to House MD so that they're ready for us. We're also hoping for some clarification. Previously, it had always been testing 20% of your overall in-school population over the course of 2 weeks. We don't know if that's still in effect or not, because the governor just said testing and testing below that positivity rate. So we are hoping that it would stay at that percentage, and also once you hit that you can discontinue testing, but that will remain to be seen. As Dr. Hines did mention, though, the governor did say it is a local decision. So, but I think we feel strongly, the governor certainly feels strongly that schools should remain open as much as possible. We are seeing from our own numbers here, there is minimal spread within the schools, if any. So we are doing what we're supposed to be doing to keep the schools open, to keep our staff and students safe. Just to hit on what we talked about a little bit earlier, yes, it's a little concerning to see the numbers. The last few days in particular, it does go along with what we expected from the holiday break. Hopefully in the next couple of days, that'll start to either level out a little bit or even come down now that students are back in the school buildings, to help prevent that spread. Again, just to go over those percentages again, Nassau County has currently, yesterday was a 9.6 positivity rate, but the 7-day average, as President Johnson mentioned, is 8.6. That is lower than Suffolk, which is at a 10.6. So I will be paying close attention. I also happen to live in a Suffolk district, so I'm going to be paying close attention to what the Suffolk schools are doing with respect to testing, so that we can get some information from them also. As of yet, I haven't heard anything from my district about it. I'm just trying to think. I know there were a couple of other concerns in terms of setting up the testing. Again, we were kind of ahead of the curve, so we have had some very preliminary conversations. I had emailed the principals about what that would look like. We're looking at designating areas within the building where the testing would happen, sending out consent forms. Dr. Shields and I had been speaking with the company Take Action that does our health app today. And hopefully they will be setting something up so we can send out the consent forms to parents that way and collecting the information. Because in order to do in-school testing, we have to have consent from the parents. So we'll be taking care of that shortly as well. The consent form is ready to go. It's just a matter of when we're going to be ready to get it out to the community to get that going. Trying to think if there's anything else. I know a couple of other related questions that have come up with respect to this is, especially with the numbers going up, DOH is definitely overwhelmed. We are still working with families, staff, students, parents. They do need that Department of Health clearance in order to return to school. If they've tested positive, if they've been deemed a close contact. Dawn Bolerman, I always have to give a huge shout out to her because she's just amazing. She sends so much information over the Department of Health. Her and I have them on speed dial. They probably know us by now, and especially her. But we do help families facilitate getting in contact with Department of Health. We will send over their positive test results so they have them. There's been a couple of instances where people haven't gotten into the system. So what they have told us, and we've advised parents, and it's worked, is to call Department of Health directly. And they will work with them to get them that clearance form in a timely manner. To my knowledge, at this point, there hasn't been anybody that hasn't been able to get it. But we do know for a fact they are very overwhelmed. So I think that those are the main things that are kind of percolating right now.
Okay. I just want to add one thing too. We know when the health screener, when the email comes out, albeit at an ungodly hour, but still nonetheless, it is incredibly important that our parents fill out, and of course our staff fills that out every single day, and they fill it out accurately. It's incredibly important if as a staff member, you stay home if you're not feeling well, and it's the same thing for our students. If our students have the slightest fever, if they're coughing, whatever it may be, please stay home. We don't want you in school. We don't want you in school sick. So that is especially over these next several weeks. So I'm imploring our parents and our staff to do that. So I think right now, I think we set the stage for where we are. I'm certain that our board trustees have questions. So Nora, if you're okay with that, we can try to answer as many as we can.
Yes, I see. Thank you very much, both of you. And I see 2 hands up. I have 3 hands up. Okay. Larry, Deb, and then Julie.
Okay, this is great. It's good information, so thank you. Besides testing rate, I mean, the amount of positives in a testing sample is directly related to the amount of people being sampled. So if Port Washington, for example, has much fewer people testing, its number could be more skewed because people are only being tested if they're symptomatic, whereas Roslyn, everybody who's healthy. So are there any metrics of what percentage of the population in each area is positive? And wouldn't that be a better metric to use than the testing, which is really pretty much by choice?
Yeah, I think that's what we're waiting for more guidance on. Hopefully they'll come back and give us a better idea of what that means. He just passed the comment that it has to be lower than the community, positivity percentage. no idea what that means.
But that community positivity percentage is probably still based upon testing, not based upon number of cases versus thousands of people who live in a community.
Probably.
Because again, we could have a 10% positive rate, but only 0.5% of the people have it. Roslyn could have a 5% population, a 5% positivity rate, and have 20% of their population have it. So they're not necessarily this. They're not necessarily the same.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Next was Deb, right? And then
Yes,
Julie.
thank you. Dr. Allen, thank you for this. I hope you got rest over break because I think you're going to need it. So I have a couple of questions. Do we know, well, I guess we have no way of knowing if we have 20% of families and staff that are going to consent to be tested. So in the event that we can't scrounge up 20%, for lack of a better word, and the test it's the nasal test, it's not, our only option then is to go fully remote for everybody. Is that correct?
There was two things that came out with this. First was if you couldn't get the 20%, you automatically closed. Then when there was a revision, one of the updates, maybe in December, it was you had to continue testing until you got that 20%. So even if that took more than the 2 weeks, you just needed to keep testing. So there is a caveat, and I'm looking into this also. In the very beginning when this came out, there was an option for school districts to accept tests from parents. So if I decide I don't give consent, but I take my child somewhere else, and give you the test results, can we use that? Originally, the answer to that was yes. So I am trying to find out if that's still an option for us. And then we would have to figure out how to report that in the system.
And this would be 10% of, 20% of the children and staff who are in school, whether hybrid at the secondary levels or in the elementary. It does not include the fully virtual students, even though we're now seeing that some fully virtual students did test positive over break. Yes, my last understanding was that it's all the in-person students and staff, not the fully virtual. And I have one more question. If we go by county, which I don't really understand because the county is very big, but if that's what the governor has decided, and we're forced to contract with St. Francis because the Department of Health is not helping us out here. I'm assuming that means other districts are looking to contract with St. Francis. So how do we avoid the dog-eat-dog situation? Because if the Department of Health is really stretched for resources now, I'm going to guess at St. Francis is it well, even if they contract with outside providers. So what is our, do we have a plan B or C or D? At this point, and when I've had conversations, I reached out to them today and I haven't heard back from them. But before the break, they had assured us that was not going to be a problem, that they were going to enter into contracts with districts and places where they knew they could provide the service. So at some point in time, if they couldn't provide the service anymore, they weren't going to enter into contracts. At this point in time, I know that they definitely have a contract with Half Hollow Hills and Roslyn, us, and I believe there's one other, but I can't remember what it was. I know when I initially spoke to them, they gave me another district's name. So, but I'm sure others have reached out since. But thank you.
Julie, thank you.
Thank you also, Dr. Allen, for everything and for always being so concise and clear on all of this. Some of my questions were asked by Ms. Brooks, but my other question is, you talked about that we'll be using the Take Action app for the consent form. Will the consent form be translated in Spanish and easily accessible for those families that it's not their native language, especially considering the delicacy of, consenting to have your child swabbed?
Yeah, we had worked on a translated version already. So I'm hoping tomorrow that Dr. Shields and I might be able to actually have a phone call with them and go over some of those nuances, but we do have a translated form already.
Emily.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Allen. I know you've been busy despite the break. I know that you've been busy. So thank you for everything that you've been doing. I have a question regarding, it's kind of building up on the way what Larry said about if everyone were to be tested in Port Washington, our numbers might actually be lower or higher. I don't know. We don't know because it's based on who's getting tested. So is there a way, and I know we're in the process of finalizing the contract with House MD, and I know that we've been proactive in getting a provider, which, as we've said, and we said it in December, and we're saying it again, that, you know, we've been given this burden, the school district has been given a burden to go figure out how to get the testing done. How about if we look, while we have this contract, can we also continue to look at other ways to do testing? Universities are doing pooled testing. There is a school district, Mamaroneck is doing saliva testing. And from what I understand, they provided every family or every student with a saliva test that they were to do, and then they sent it to a lab. And so would there be a way for us to maybe look at maybe some other options? And for me, if maybe the saliva test would be something that all parents would agree to, and if we could test our entire student population, perhaps we could get a real understanding or more accurate understanding percentage-wise. So I don't mean to put more things on your plate by far, but I'm suggesting that maybe as we've been juggling 50 million things, maybe there's a way for us to maybe ease some of the concerns and get a different way of testing. I don't know. I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yes, we'll continue to look at this. I know I have conversations with Dr. Wilkins, our school physician. Just the other day, she had sent me some information even from her home district where they've allowed a van to come and set up on site. So the school district is not necessarily involved at all, but it does provide an opportunity. And she sent me the information about that. And even has talked about doing something with her ProHealth that she works for and possibly setting something up. Right now, the state only provides the nasal swabs when we do the order. But I certainly can, look into it and see what other districts are doing and how they're accessing that information. So I have a Nassau directors meeting on Friday, and this is usually a big topic of conversation. So I can ask.
Thank you. I mean, and again, it was Mamaroneck that did this. So if you were to reach out to a specific school district, you might ask how they got it done.
Yep, will do. Thank you.
Larry, do you have another question, or
No, I think he never put his hand down.
He just did. Okay. Any more questions for Dr. Allen before we move on? Okay, well, thank you again for that informative and comprehensive report. Thank you. I know there's a lot of unknowns, and we appreciate you putting together what we do know.
No problem. Thanks.
The next item that we will be discussing is the budget, and I turn it over to Mrs. Callahan.
Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. Earlier, someone said, I never like to say something because people take and run with it. And that's sort of how I feel about budget, that this is a lengthy process and that it's important for people to be involved all the way along so that you don't hear a snippet of information that ultimately changes dramatically by the time our process is complete and we have come up with our final budget that we are adopting for the community to vote upon. So this is very preliminary. It's important to know where we are starting from. And you will all remember that because we were closed for 3 months last school year, our fund balance, fortunately, did reflect about a $3.5 million increase, $2 million in the restricted reserves that the district has, and $1.5 million in the unassigned. So that's the good news. Then we go to our COVID expenses, which really have not changed since the last I reported to you in December. And we actually spent $3.75 million in unanticipated expenditures, which include staffing, some of which had been planned for by the board in the preparation of the 2021 budget. So overall, we will have overspent, or I anticipate we will have overspent our budget by about $2.8 million come June. As of the last appropriation status report, we have about $7 million that have been not encumbered at this point. So every other dollar but for $7 million is accounted for in salaries and benefits and purchases made by the various buildings and directors. Relative to our upcoming budget, all of the principals and directors have submitted their requests, which are being input based on their requests rather than challenging every dollar to begin with. As a matter of fact, even yesterday, Mr. Maloney provided some revisions to his documentation, trying to increase several of his codes by almost $100,000. Taking a look at what we do have the new rates for the employees' retirement system pension fund, which has gone up from 14.6% to 16.2%. I have not yet put the dollar amount into the budget that's a reflection on that, because we're looking at all the salaries for next year first. The same goes for the teachers' retirement system, where that is estimated to come in around 10%. This year's number was 9.53% on salaries, so that will not be as dramatic an increase. The health insurance costs have come in, and there are at least 6 or 7 different rates that we apply depending on your status as an active employee with family members, or if you are a retiree, Medicare eligible, and a single person. But overall, our increased costs are about 4% there. So based on the information I do have, we're sitting with a 3.25% budget increase in very, very early draft form. We do not yet know the tax levy limit number, although that should be coming out within the next few days. And we anticipate that to certainly be below 2%. So we will have many more meetings internally before we come back with a budget that the administration is willing to support and ask the board to also support. And I know you have another item on the discussion for this evening, which is not in any way reflected in next year's budget yet. Should that be the direction that the board wants to take. So as I said, this is very, very preliminary, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have based on what I've been able to provide to you thus far.
Thank you, Mrs. Callahan. Ms. Bays has a question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Callahan. I have a quick question, or 2 questions. One, we have not received any of our state aid runs, right? They usually come out at the end of January. So we haven't received any of these state aid information yet, have we?
We have not received any information on cuts to state aid. We do receive monthly output reports based on what is anticipated. Thus far, we have not seen, although we've been threatened with cuts.
Right, but this would be cuts from this year's budget. I'm talking about next year's numbers. We haven't seen any of those numbers yet. Okay, so right, so that's and I think it is a good point to bring up is that you started by saying that we have overspent our budget by $2.8 million, or we anticipate that we'll be spending our budget by $2.8 million. I think we have to keep in mind also the threat of cut in state aid, and that 2.8 relies upon the state aid that we believe we will be getting. So that 2.8 may in fact become greater, not by our doing, but by the cut of state aid. So, and again, your number that you brought up before about the right now very preliminary without knowing state the tax levy is a 3.25% increase. That also includes what we currently have received in state aid, right? So when you do your numbers and you're saying we're going up, that's assuming that we'd be getting the same type of state aid next year?
Well, that
was a question and a statement.
That's the budget increase versus the levy increase. The levy increase will be impacted more by the amount
State
of
aid.
aid we do or don't get. Certainly, if our state aid is cut for next year, then we have to look at the budgeted numbers and cut those costs down even further, which will never be met through supplies and equipment only.
And the $7 million that we have right now that is not yet encumbered, has there been a spending freeze enacted? I know that we, at some point, and I know maybe we discussed it at the budget meeting a little bit, but have we put out a, cease and desist on spending, please?
We have put out a cease and desist without, we need a rationale that's provided in writing for anything now that we're into January. And we did speak about that this morning in our cabinet meeting, or yesterday in our cabinet meeting.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Larry?
I think Deb was first.
Oh, sorry. I'm looking up, not across. Deb?
Thank you. So I'm just going to ask a very preliminary question. When you say 2% tax cap, I know what you mean, but 2% is not necessarily 2%. So I don't know if you want to explain that now for new people who might be listening, because you did mention a current budget increase at 3.25%. May very well be within the 2% tax cap, which may not sound feasible to somebody who doesn't really understand how that's calculated. I don't know if you want to go into that now, just briefly explain it, how it sounds illogical, but it's based on the calculation, it isn't necessarily.
The short version is that the state promulgates a number. That number is used in a formula, which then allows a district to either reach the number promulgated or even exceed it, depending on exemptions that are allowed within the formula that have to do with debt service, with bonding, with capital expenditures. When we talk about our transfer to capital line and we talk about roofs and things of that nature, expenditures we anticipate during the subsequent year of that nature are all excluded from the overall formula increase. And eventually we have to come to a number where we have to subsidize the taxpayers' money with money from our savings in order to equal out what our budget expenditures are anticipated to be. If we can't do that, we have a ceiling that we cannot exceed for the taxpayer, and therefore we either have to cut our budget or we have to take more of the district's savings to make those totals of all of our aids and revenues equal what is our budget expectation.
So I just want, for people who are new to understand, if we end up, with this 3.25% or whatever, it's possible that legally that falls within the 2% tax cap. It's possible, depending on what the calculation ends up being.
Yes, we
Okay.
have, and generally speaking, our tax levies have been close to our budgeted numbers. They may be a tenth of a point different, but generally speaking, wherever our budget amount ends up, our levy is close to that, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now I do believe it's Larry's turn.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Mary, as usual, for all of this information. Over the past several years, we've tended to craft our budget based upon the tax levy limit. And we've tended to modify our program to fit into that. And I know Dr. Hines has lots of things that he wants to do. And I know we have an achievement gap that isn't getting any better. And I know there's lots of things we need to do as a district. What I would actually like to see is not a rollover budget or anything else, but I'd like to see, based upon the priorities of the superintendent, what would it cost to run the program that he wants to run? And that may be 30%, and we may go, no way. But I think that's the place we should start, because if it's going to make, we have to decide whether or not we want to try to pierce the tax cap or not. And in the past, we've always decided not to. But again, there are benefits and risks to doing it. Now, if we start moving money around to try to help with our district goal of equity, well, that's going to affect some of the students who are no longer going to be getting what they're getting. So we may need a bigger pot, and I would just sort of like to start out with that number and play with it, rather than start out with, this is what we think we can pass, let's figure out how to make the program work.
Noted.
I thank you, Larry. I think that is a good point. I think we talk about what the programs, and we are talking about, as Mary pointed out later, the programs that we want to put in place. And so let's not start off with the cuts, but more importantly, what we think we can deliver.
I appreciate that, Larry. Thank you.
Rachel.
I agree with Larry's philosophical point, and I just wanted to take it one step further into the practical, and point out that last year we passed a budget that was very, very, very low. And I think for the members of the community that are watching, I can speak only for my opinion, because obviously the board is not voting on what I'm saying right now, but in my opinion, this district cannot afford another scraping down as low as we can go budget. We have already done that in this past year. We were trying to be very conscious of the tough economic times that people were living in. And unfortunately, I know it's continuing. And at the time, maybe we thought this year would be better. And I know this year is still difficult for people, but the children of Port Washington literally cannot afford us to pass another low budget. This budget needs to be at the tax levy limit, in my opinion. If not, us having a conversation, as Larry just said, about whether or not we need to pierce the cap to do what we need to do. I think in Port Washington, we like to be proud of the program that we offer. We like to be proud of our education, and people don't like to criticize too much. But I think that we really owe it to the community to be upfront about the fact that we made some uncomfortable cuts this past year. We made cuts for things that our superintendent thought were very, very important. We are not running an inclusive classroom that we were going to add in the elementary school. We've cut AIS reading and math for children. For anybody who's not familiar with that, this is reading and math help for children who fit within a certain percentage where the state doesn't mandate us to do it, but they really benefit from it. And it's life-changing in terms of academic achievement for these kids. So when we're talking about an achievement gap, this is some of what comes in at the early roots of what's causing that achievement gap, or at least what can be addressing that achievement gap early on. These are important programs. We're also not running PEP in the elementary up through 6th grade. There are a lot of cuts that have happened. And in my opinion, we should be building back and listening to our superintendent about what we want this district to look like. We all want to be living in a strong school district. We want to be educating our children as best we can. And we're not doing the best we can this year. We're doing the best we can with the fact that we had to spend millions and millions of dollars on this pandemic. But I think with more money, we can do better. I want to be clear now that I've said that out loud, though. I mean, absolutely no slight to our teachers when I say that, because I think the person resources in this district are immense. And we have gifted teachers here, but they too deserve our support financially. And they will be better off also if we have a little more funding in the coming year. So I'm looking forward to voting for a more robust budget as we build it over the next couple of months. Mrs. Callahan, thank you for all your help. And I wish that I didn't think that you were going to have to be redoing this budget again, but I think Governor Cuomo may be taking no pity on you this year and maybe doing the same thing to us and shooting us information that changes things all along the way. So thank you in advance for that too.
You're welcome. I just hope we have an in-person vote.
Absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to seeing everybody's faces.
Thank you. Anybody have any additional comments or questions regarding the budget? Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Callahan. We can move on to what is now our third discussion item, and that is NYU Metro. And Dr. Hines will give us some information about that.
Well, thank you, President Johnson. Real quick before I move into that realm, I just checked the thought exchange just to see how it's faring at this moment. We've had over 400 participants already. So that is really good news. And I want to extend a big thank you to everyone who's participating.
I hope that means that they're multitasking and listening to us and doing thought exchange. They didn't choose thought exchange.
Yeah. Hopefully they were selective. Or I don't know if all 400 are watching the board meeting, but I will
That's
say
about 300 more than the people who are watching.
I don't think we have that many, right?
Yeah. So with that being said, let me move into my recommendation to the board as we embark on this really important journey. So I'm recommending to the Board of Education that we move forward with NYU Metro Center for Research on Equity and the Transformation of Schools. That's what they specialize in, to assist us with our focus on equity and anti-racism within our schools. So let me begin with some simple New York State report card data. And I just want to look at one data point over a few years. And it's graduation rates, which is the ultimate exit outcome, right? As far as why we're here. You know, I say this often, you know, students are in our schools for 13 years, sometimes 14 years with pre-K, 14,000 hours plus. And ultimately, we want all of them to graduate. That's incredibly important. We know for a fact that when our kids or any child in any school district does not graduate, there isn't even an 8 ball to be behind. They are well behind the curve in many ways. So but before I share this data, there is something, by the way, this is all the data that I'm sharing. It's in the public domain and it's available on the New York State Education website. So it's available for everybody. And like I said before, this is a sample of 4-year graduation rates. I don't like to look at 5 years. I like to look at 4. We want our students out of here in 4 years, not 5 years. And I'm sure when you were in high school, you didn't want to stay for that extra year. So that's what I believe we should be looking at. Even though, Dr. Mioli, maybe like when he was in high school, wanted to stay for an extra year because he
No,
loved
we only
school.
had 3 back then.
Oh, okay. So let me talk about some really important data, and I don't want to dig too deep. I'm just going to look at some subgroups. I want to share the 2018-19 data. When we look at our Hispanic Latino graduation rate, it was 77%. When we look at our ENL graduation rate, it was 37%. When we look at our Black graduation rate, it was 80%. And when we look at our white graduation rate, it was 98.5%. Now, again, there is so many different things that we can talk about as to why this is, and this is not about blaming anybody. And by the way, when we look at data from other school districts as well, I'm sure you'll see some very similar patterns and themes. So, but that's for 2018-19. Now, let me go back to 1920. All right, so that's a year later. And we look at Hispanic Latino at 68% graduation rate. We look at our ENL population at 26%. We look at our Black, there wasn't enough of a cohort. There weren't enough students for us to look at. So that information is not available. Certainly we can find that out. I just didn't have it at my fingertips. And then when we look at our white population, it was 98.5. So we see sometimes between a 20% difference, sometimes a 30 to 40% difference as far as graduation rates. And of course, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, how big were the cohorts, right? So for a white population, it was well over 250, 260 students. When we look at our Hispano-Latino population, it was around 75 to 80 students. So they're smaller. And so you'll see how that plays a difference as far as what it could potentially mean for those graduation rates and how they can fluctuate a lot more than with a larger sample size. But then for fun, I figured not really fun, I wanted to go back to 2012, 2013, just to show you, and again, to show our community what it was like even back, 8 or 9 years ago. And we looked at Hispanic Latino at 56% graduation rate, ENL at 40, or Black population. Unfortunately, cohort wasn't big enough even back then. And then our white population, as far as their graduation rate, was 99%. So that's just one data point. And this is one reason why we need to look at our school system through equity and through a resource lens, as far as what we can do for our students. And there are many other reasons as well. So, as I shared with the board, I want to say early last month, maybe it was the middle of last month, but I reviewed several different partners, for us to potentially work with us. One was Joyce James Consulting from Houston. I know that President Johnson and I spoke with Ms. James. And I always feel like I want to say James Joyce as far as Joyce James. But we spoke to her for a while, and she did some real incredible work in Nyack, which is in Westchester. Nyack, which is in Westchester. Did some really incredible work there. And she has, a whole series of things that she does with school districts. Somewhat similar to NYU, but a little bit different in some ways. And when I looked at what the price point was as far as what her services were, like most consultants, they're expensive. But that was not the real reason why I don't think we should move in that direction. I also looked at and spoke with some other organizations and agencies. As you know, we spoke with the Racism Research, Campbell Jones and Associates in Maryland. Looked at Conscious Education Consulting again out of Texas, and Generation Ready as well, which is in New York. But after exploring all the potential options, I feel NYU's history of success really meets our needs. So in short, just to give a backdrop and background as far as NYU and what they've done as far as the Metro Center, for the past 15 years, they've been a contractor for the New York State Education Department. And that I think holds a lot of weight because they state that based on best practices, innovations in equity and systemic change offers educational institutions, which would be our school district, customized systemic equity work, including utilizing a set of tools and expertise to assist districts and schools in reducing, and this is what we want, disparities in assessments, placement, and outcomes of students across race, socioeconomic status, and abilities. That's really what we're talking about. That is the crux of the work that we have before us. And of course, this has to be done with high fidelity. And this is not an inoculation, not to talk about shots and vaccines and everything else, but this is a longitudinal relationship. This is not a one and done. This is something I believe that we will, as Ms. Callahan talked about before, as we're talking about the budget, we will have to look at for at least the next 3 to 4 years. So what they say, if it's implemented with high fidelity over 4 years, districts and schools achieve statistically significant results in closing racial gaps across achievement, graduation, special education placements, and school suspensions. So I want to say that again. They assist to achieve statistically significant results in closing racial gaps across achievement, graduation, special education placements, and school suspensions. That's really what this work's about. So in their 15 years of experience, they had partnerships with over 75 school districts in New York State. And they provided trainings to over 70 districts across all the different regions in New York as well. Participants who complete the culturally responsive education sequence show positive changes in awareness of both racial privilege and institutional discrimination. That's something I believe that we have to take a deep dive into as well. So over the years, too many minority students have not succeeded here. And again, it's not just here, it's in many school districts, but they haven't succeeded as well as their peers. And in other cases, they haven't been provided the same opportunities. So at this point, what I've done, not to go on too long, I'm meeting with the director of the NYU Metro Center this week to discuss the pre-work before we begin the deep work in March. And so there are some things that I will update the board if the board permits at our next board meeting in January. I could give a little more detail as what that preliminary work looks like. And then we could begin to engage this incredibly important work moving forward. And of course, yes, there is a price point. This isn't free. And as I said before, the price point is $41,000 for this year. What does it look like for next year? I don't know yet, but hopefully I'll have some more information to share with the board later. Like everything else, the return on this investment, I believe, if done right and if done longitudinally, will not only set this district apart in many ways, but I believe it'll make sure and ensure that all of our students get what they need and deserve. And so I stand before you as far as saying, I believe we need to move forward. I know we're doing this in the middle of a pandemic during a surge, but there's no time like now to start moving this ship forward. So that's what I have for you, President Johnson. I'm sure some of our board trustees may have some questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Hines. And I, for one, am very excited about starting this partnership and embarking on this work. Larry and then Deb.
Oh, Deb was first again.
Oh, sorry. God, I must have something against
She
you
beat me
tonight.
by a millisecond. She's faster fingers.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
My itchy finger. So thank you, Dr. Hines. I'm looking at the stats and I'm thinking to myself, 2012, I think, was when Common Core came along. But aside from that, this is obviously very important work and very profound work. And as I was listening to, and I know I heard you say this previously, but it finally struck me how many school districts are finding themselves having to confront the issue in order to fix it, not just acknowledge it, but fixing something. And it makes me think that there is something much bigger at play, whether it's societal, whether it's coming from state ed, or because there seems to be this big commonality there, and I can't quite put my finger on it, but I was struck by the number of school districts currently or in the past working with NYU on this. So I applaud you for it, and I hope we can find the money to make this happen and finally put these statistics in the rearview mirror and move forward as we should. So I thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think like anything else, right? If we prioritize it, then we move it forward, right? It's like anything else in life. Not that I have any money at home that my wife shares with me, but she says, and I say that kiddingly, but she's like, listen, you have this amount of money. If you want to spend it on something, you spend it on what you want to spend it on, and it has to be important to you. And I'm saying that in our school district, if this is our priority, we need to find the money somewhere else, maybe. Maybe we don't, and I'm not saying we don't run programs, but it is time that we start looking at other areas that maybe over time it hasn't been effective use of what we're spending. And that is a really good practice to undertake. So in as much as, we're hoping that maybe we can get some of this money through grants, at some point, we can't rely on grants if this is something that we believe, as we work on our vision and mission and define our core values, that we would actually have this allocated within our actual, general fund to move this forward. So, but again, I digress.
Larry, and then Rachel. I thought I saw Emily's hand up. Am I wrong? Yeah.
Yeah, Emily's
Okay,
hand is up.
Larry.
So, I agree that, this certainly is, the time is right. I won't say it's overdue, but this is certainly, we should strike while the iron is hot. And this is a priority of the board and of the district. So yes, this is where our resources should be going if we believe that this is what it is. I was struck by a couple of things about the way they work, because they sort of work, they don't just come in and give you a book and say, this is what you do, but they work collaboratively with people, which sort of reminds me a little bit of the ruler training that we're doing. And I have a feeling, mixing the two of them together, will probably give us a, bigger bang for the buck, and maybe move things along a little faster, because as we're working on these issues, we're also working on everybody's emotional intelligence and their ability to relate to people and everything else. So anyways, I think they sort of mesh together nicely. I was struck with something that Dr. Mioli said earlier today, which he said there was one period where there wasn't an achievement gap, and in the late 60s. And I'm wondering whether there's anything that we can cull from that. What was different then? Was the funding better? Was the, what was the cohort different? Were there just less people in school? Anyway, it'd be sort of interesting whether there's anything there that we can help to inform our, inform us going forward. Because certainly if it was successful for a certain period of time, there had to be something happening at that point.
I don't know the answer.
Well, I just wanted to give credit where it's due. Linda Darling-Hammond did an extensive study on this, and it's not that we solved it, but that we addressed it, and we narrowed those achievement gaps in significant ways with very specific programs. And so I just wanted to make sure that we knew, as daunting as the task will be, that there are models that we can look to.
Definitely, and I don't want to, take up too much time, but listen, James Comer's been talking about closing the achievement gap, working out of Yale, working out of New Haven since 1969. He's been doing it every year for the past 40 plus years as longitudinal data. So there are select people who really have a great not only passion for this, but a real understanding of what it takes. And I mean, certainly Linda Darling Hammond is one of them, but so is James Comer, and there's a few others out there. But I really believe as we move forward, this preliminary work from now until mid-March is going to be really critical. And we talk about lead learners and what that entails. Who will be the lead learners within our district? How will they be defined? This is not just an administrative effort. This is a teacher effort. This is administrative effort, certainly with the board. We want all hands on deck. And so these are the things I want to discuss with the director as far as what her thoughts are as how we could not only begin this work, but certainly I need to, and our team cabinet needs to engage in conversations with certainly with our teachers and other people within our community.
Emily? You're muted.
Sorry. Larry actually said what I wanted to say about this work is in line with our board goals and our district goals. And as you said, Dr. Hines, it will help to put together our vision, mission, and strategic 5-year plan. And so I believe that this is an investment that is needed. And I think as going back to the conversation we had earlier about budget and how, we don't want to be in a position always of cutting things from our budget. I think that this is work that potentially would allow for us to really provide something meaningful and fix our education. So I am very eager for this work to start, and I look forward to working or hearing more about what they come up with.
For our process people here, and I think there are quite a few, and rightfully so, there is a clear process that NYU has. And so when I'm able to really make sure that I can fully articulate what that process looks like, what the benchmarks are, what the report will look like when everything is done, and then what the next steps are after everything is completed, at least in May, June. I want to make sure that the board is up to speed as far as what that looks like. I think that's incredibly important as well, not only just looking toward the end game, but what it looks like from as we start to where we end and where our benchmarks are, and then reporting along the way to the board as far as how things are going.
I don't know if I have this in the right order, but I know Julie had her hand up, and I see Deb this time, and now I see Rachel too.
I think the order, if you just want to go by order, it was Rachel, Julie, and Deb.
Rachel, Julie, and then Deb.
Thanks, Nora. Thanks, Emily. So a couple comments. I mean, first I wanted to say I'm very glad that we're pursuing this. I think the time is more than ripe for this kind of work. And I think it's a really important part of our educational program. So thank you for doing all this research and looking into these various groups. And I appreciate your recommendation on this group. I wanted to note for the people who are listening, though, because we're talking about the achievement gap a lot, that's not the only focus of this work, and it's not the only reason to do it. And in fact, even though the achievement gap is a huge issue and one that we want to fix, I wouldn't even say it's the majority of the reason to do this. I think we'll have many more public conversations about this. And I'm hoping they will be that public conversations, because I think we do need to hear from the community on these issues. And I'm assuming this process will involve a lot of conversation with the staff and with the students, and hopefully with the community as well. But I think it's important for people to understand that if you're talking about thinking about a world where anti-racism is important, you're not just speaking about the benefits to the people who are impacted by those issues directly. You're talking about the kind of world you're building for everybody. So to talk about it in the most simplified terms, when you talk about a culturally responsive curriculum, one of the examples, or we'll call it an example, one of the things that people sometimes talk about is like, it's important to have, I know Dr. Westerfeld was working on this, it's important to have a classroom library where children can see people who look like them in books. That changes the way they see the world around them. But I think it's also important to note that that changes the way the other children see the world around them too. That it's not just people who look like them for the white children in the books, that they are seeing a variety of skin colors and a variety of cultures and a variety of ethnicities, and they understand the world as a complex place where people are different, and that differences can be understood and celebrated. So I think that it's really important. I've given it a long-winded way now, but it's really important that everybody understand this is a benefit to every single child in Port Washington. This is not something that we are exploring to simply address issues that impact some kids. It's that we fundamentally believe these issues impact all the children because it impacts the kind of world that we live in, and that's an important educational issue. So thank you for doing this. I have two concerns with that said. One is the budgetary issue, and I know you're on top of this, but I do want to note that I'm concerned about figuring this out in a way that fits in with our budget. I completely agree with you and applaud you for saying let's build from the ground up and figure out what's important, and also look at whether there are things that we are just used to spending money on that maybe aren't working. I think that's a great idea and a great practice anyway, even if we're not trying to find money, to fund this. But that's my concern that I wanted to put out there. And I know that you're working on it, and I know you're thinking about it. I just know that there are many, many important things that we need to be able to fund. And, it's all well and good to say we can't live without this, but if you don't have the money, you don't have the money. And I don't want to be left with a situation where we don't have the money for things that we really do need. I think we need to be thinking about the whole big picture. And I know you are. So thank you for that too.
Thank you for that comment, Rachel. And I think that that's something that we have said before, but you said it so well, and we hadn't really said it just now, but it clearly is the way we want all children and the entire community to look forward and to move into the future, and particularly in our role as educating children. It's completely for the benefit of all children, and we really can't deliver education here if equity isn't a component. And I think it does clearly, the intention is to benefit every child who's going to be living in the 21st century. So I thank you though for saying that and bringing that forward. Okay, now if I need a reminder here, I'm going to just go with Deb and then Julie because I keep overlooking Deb. Deb,
I
you
defer
go.
to Julie. Julie was before me, but thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to always go with you first, Deb, so I don't screw that up again.
Thank you, Deb. So Dr. Hines, thank you. I appreciate all of the information you provided, and I really appreciate the fact that you did not just look at one entity or organization, but took the time to explore a multitude of businesses, consultants, practices within not only New York State, but outside of the state, just to have that different perspective. And as we've said, this is a board goal. We want to tie a financial commitment with it. It's got a long process ahead of us, 3 to 5 years probably, to really see that full return on investment. So of course, in this process, and putting budget aside, because I completely agree with the points Rachel was making about budget, but the other aspect or concern is during this vetting process, were you also working within our Port Washington community with any staff or administration to get their buy-in? Because of course, our program is only successful if we know that our staff, our community is willing to accept it or at least work within it. And so I was just curious if any of our staff or administration were part of the decision-making process, or at least made aware of what's going on, so that you could get some thoughts from them in order to ask the questions, so that you could find out that NYU or whatever company that you settled on is the right one to lead us down the path that we're looking for the greatest success in this topic.
So I will answer that question with, as far as the cabinet, they were aware of it for sure. As far as me speaking with teachers or principals or anybody else, no. Because to be honest with you, this is my decision and my research, and to be honest with you, my recommendation to the board. And so I felt very comfortable taking this on. Now, where I need collaboration and where I need the buy-in, so to speak, has to do with what happens when they're here. So that engagement is critically important. But as far as the researching and everything else, I look at that as the job as a superintendent, for me to do the research and for me to make the recommendation to the board.
Thank you. Deb?
Thank you. So I imagine there are a variety of reasons why the graduation rates are what they are. In order to solve the problem, we need to know the what is creating the problem. And is that part of what NYU will do? Will they look at it and say, well, it could be a cultural issue, it could be an institutional issue within the school, it could be a curriculum issue? I mean, is that something that we would be paying NYU to do, to identify what's causing this? And are they also going to offer recommendations as to how to fix it? What is the
Great.
scope of their work?
Yeah, no, those are great questions. They do a root cause analysis. I mean, so they're going to come in here and they're going to speak to people. They're going to look at data longitudinally, and certainly what we have in front of us. They'll look at everything, and in the end, they'll make a recommendation to us, and then help us create a strategic plan moving forward to enact that. So there is a process that they have. And I believe there are 8 online half days, and then they come in 2 full days, because it's incredibly important for them to see and feel what Port Washington is, and what our schools look like, and what our classrooms look like, and what we're thinking and feeling. And I think I spoke about this before, maybe in a different venue. We all have biases and assumptions. We have to really dig deep into what that looks like and sounds like. And so in the end, when they conduct this, I hate to use the word audit because it's such a negative connotation attached to it, but they're really doing a deep dive into our DNA. And they're going to say, listen, after conducting this deep dive, this is what our recommendations are. And again, it's just the first step. I think I said this before too. Like, we're in the zygote stages right now. We are in the embryonic stages of where we are, and it's going to be really hard work. And to Julie's point, as far as getting buy-in, it is critical when they are here that we don't do this for a year or two and then it's shelved for nothing. That is what we don't want. And I think we can learn from the past, and I think we can take what we've learned from the past and to make this something really special that I think not only the board can be proud of, but what our community can be proud of. But it starts with that root cause analysis as far as us moving forward. That is the first step, coupled with the pre-work before they come here in March.
Thank you. Any other questions about the NYU Metro at the moment? Okay, I just want to point out that it is part of on our agenda. We will be voting on a resolution to partner with them, which is item, it's right in the beginning, 11.1.2. Okay, if there's no more questions about that, we can move on. And thank you, everybody, for your input. As I said, and as all of us have said, we're really eager to do that, to start the work and do that deep dive. Committee reports. First is policy and personnel. Deb?
Sorry, I was looking at the agenda as I
That's
was
okay.
listening to you. Thank you. Okay, so we had our last policy and personnel meeting December 16th, just before we went on break. Dr. Shields told us about the fact that we have 10 teachers who submitted their retirement notice, 6 at the elementary school, 1 STEAM teacher, 2 speech, 1 at the high school, 1 elementary, and 1 phys ed at the elementary level. The search for a replacement for the irreplaceable Mary Callahan continues. The goal is to complete the search by the end of January, and I believe we're still on track for that. We reviewed certain policies, the chain of command, which we renamed the chain of command for public complaints, will be on for a first reading at our next Board of Ed meeting, along with the policy 1420. We reviewed policy 1130, which is media relations, which will also be on for a first reading at our next Board of Ed meeting. We had a very in-depth discussion about our social media policy, which we drafted literally from scratch. That is going to be sent to the attorneys for review to make sure that what we're trying to say, we're actually saying and doing it in a legal way. We still have to get to the online distance and remote learning policy, and more importantly, our equity inclusivity policy that is the prototype drafted by NISPA. We're going to put that on at the beginning of the agenda in January so that we're sure we get to it and it doesn't end up being carried over till February. And our next meeting is the 20th, which is, I guess, 2 weeks from tomorrow at 9:30 a.m.
Thank you for that report. Next, we have budget and facilities. Beth?
Hi, everybody. I am not going to reiterate most of what was said about our last meeting, because the presentation that we had this afternoon or this evening from Mary was pretty much what we were discussing at our last meeting. But as I always like to say in January, welcome to budget season. We are starting over and we will be working on budget from now until the budget vote, until we adopt the budget, which is usually about early April. So this is really our crunch time. I hope a lot of you can join us, because paying attention to this is definitely a critical piece to what our educational program will look like next year. Our next budget and facilities meeting is this coming Monday, which is, I haven't looked at the calendar, but that's January 11th. It'll be at 1 p.m. And truthfully, I hope you can get involved, because at the end of the day, all of the decisions and all of the things we're talking about tonight and every program we would like to do, it is all dependent on us finding the appropriate appropriations through the budget process. So it is a critical part of our children's education. So I hope to see many of you virtually on Monday at 1 o'clock, and we will be meeting from now until we adopt the budget pretty much every Monday before a general board meeting, in case you're interested in putting it in your calendar. Thanks, Nora.
Thank you. Okay, curriculum committee, Rachel.
So the last curriculum committee meeting was actually before our last board meeting. So there's no further report, but our next curriculum committee meeting will be on Wednesday, January 13th at 9:30 in the morning. And the topic will be instruction, as in curriculum and instruction. I look forward to seeing everybody there.
Thank you. We have not had, we haven't had safety and substance. So I'm pretty sure of that. I would know about that. Okay, diversity committee. I will say that we will be, I'm not sure yet, but definitely the diversity committee will be interfacing with the work that NYU Metro is doing, but we haven't, haven't figured out all the particulars yet. We do have an evening meeting coming up, and that's January 27th at 7 p.m. For those of you who have not attended our meetings, they're posted, of course, on the YouTube channel. And one of the things we are going to be doing at the next meeting for the first time is discuss a book that was collectively decided by the members of the committee. And that book is Cast. I'm going to hold it up. And it is by Isabel Wilkerson. If anybody, you're welcome to come, of course, even if you haven't read the book. But if you are planning to come to the meeting or attend the meeting on January 27th, that will be part of the discussion. The other part of the discussion will be Shirley Sapiro, who is the director of ENL, will be doing a presentation on the ENL program, because we do talk about it frequently, and I think it's always good for those of us who are not that involved with it on a day-to-day basis to know more about it. So pretty excited for that meeting. Legislative Task Force, I know we have some information.
Yes, we do. So the Legislative Task Force met on December 9th, and it was right at the on the cusp of us being told that we would be doing or having to do yellow zone testing, and we were preparing the discussion of the yellow zone testing and the unfunded mandate that it was putting on our school district. So we decided as a task force to put together a letter to our legislators discussing the burden that testing would cause on our school districts. We also discussed a effort that NYSBA has actually taken on, which is regarding the digital divide and asking for federal funding in helping with the digital divide. So we've put together two letters. One was to our federal legislators to discuss the funding of COVID relief and the question of whether or not school districts were getting that funding directly, or with how it was done with the CARES Act. It went through the governor's office, and then we weren't really getting direct benefit. Since all of this work has been done, there has been a new federal relief bill that has been signed, and there is no more, at least we don't think, as we discussed earlier today, no more yellow zone testing. So we have, and the board has received, and it's on the agenda, there's a letter that was put together with regards to the digital divide, which was pretty much a NYSBA kind of like a form letter, but it was put, we added some more specific Port Washington information. And then there is a letter to the federal letter, but could be sent to all our legislators about how funding help. The committee is meeting again tomorrow at 11 a.m. I wanted to ask the board if you had the opportunity to look at those letters. I think that the committee is going to meet tomorrow and make changes, perhaps update them especially in light of all the new developments. So we're meeting tomorrow. We met on the 9th. We're meeting on January 6th at 11 a.m. tomorrow. You can find it on the YouTube channel. But if anybody had any specific questions, I think we could discuss them now. Larry, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah,
Larry,
you mentioned the CARES Act, and this was sort of a question I maybe should have asked Mrs. Callahan before, but the CARES Act provided some money for education. Do we know how much is coming to us, and whatever comes to us, will that be offset by cuts elsewhere?
Is that from CARES Act money, or the new money?
Yeah,
okay.
the new CARES
Mary,
Act had a certain amount of money for education.
The CARES Act is supposed to supplement where or supplant, I think the right word is, the money that the governor took out of our state aid for this year. The CARES money has not come yet. So if we do not receive that, our revenue will be down by $377,000. This is money we have already counted on for our usual general fund expenditures. Based on how the CARES Act has been written and the requirements for how that money is spent, we will not have a problem being able to document that the money was used mainly for COVID expenditures.
Great, thank you.
But Larry, I think the question that Mary answered is the past bill, not the bill that was just signed at the end of December. I think the bill that was signed at the end of December, what I read is that, and I think Education Week put out an article that said that this particular funding is supposed to go close to 70%, is the way the bill was written, close to 70% has to go directly to the school districts. Now, what that means, I do not know, but that changes the way, it's not the way CARES Act was given out, is what I said, right? So that's what we need to discuss tomorrow at the Legislative Task Force. So, you know,
and I understand. I guess my question, ends up being, if based upon the formula of that, we're supposed to get $300,000 as a figure that has to come directly to us, does the governor say, well, good, I'm not giving you this other $300,000 that I promised you, and do we end up in the same boat that we are, or do we actually get any money? But yeah, I look forward to the discussion tomorrow. And sorry to sort of divert it, just when you mentioned CARES Act, it reminded me.
Thank you. No, it's good. Did anybody else have any other questions? So I do believe that we should act on the digital divide letter, because it is something, the effort that the regents are partaking in, NYSBA's partaking in, and there's no reason that Port Washington should not have our name added to the list of school districts that are campaigning for it. So the plan will be is that when the committee meets tomorrow and looks at the letters and discusses any sort of changes they may or may want to do, we will have those letters finalized by January 19th when we meet again, and we will present them to the board for voting upon resolution so that we can get them to the legislators. That's my update.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for all the work that the Legislative Task Force is doing. We all appreciate it. And everyone's welcome to join tomorrow. What time is the meeting again?
11.
Okay. Now we move on to the action items, and I just want to highlight a couple of donations first, and it's item 11.1.1. I want to thank an anonymous donor for a donation to the J.D. Bloomfeld Memorial Scholarship Fund, which is awarded to a senior every year. And I would also like to acknowledge and thank, this is under item 11.3.2, and that is we are accepting, we're going to vote on this, but we're going to vote on accepting a donation from the elementary school HSA and PTAs for the daily pre-K program. And I want to thank in advance the HSAs for making that generous donation. And the third donation we have tonight is an anonymous donor who is making a significant donation to the daily, which will go to the daily elementary school for Create Space, which is a virtual program. And I actually did read about it, but I can't recall right now, but it did look very interesting. I think it has to do with mindfulness, but I'm not 100% sure. So it does. Okay. So thank you for all of the generosity. We do have an incredibly generous community, and I see it all the time, and I especially see it when I'm preparing for these meetings with all the donations that are coming in. Okay, so we can now do the consent agenda. So I'm going to move to accept items 11.1 to 11.6.2. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Larry. Ms. Callahan, if you can do the honors.
Certainly. Excuse me. Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Mrs. Weisberg,
My God. Sorry, Mary, the mute button wouldn't hit. Yes.
Mrs. Days,
Yes.
Ms. Brooks,
Yes.
Ms. Epstein,
Yes.
Ms. Gilliar,
Yes.
Mr. Greenstein.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, now we're on item number 12 for those who are following along with the agenda. And we are now, the recommended action is to approve policy 8131, which is our epidemic and pandemic policy, which I do believe that Ms. Brooks mentioned before. Making a motion to adopt that policy. Do I have a second?
I will second the policy.
Okay, Deb's going to second it. Ms. Callahan, if you could do the honors.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes, absolutely.
Mrs. Weisberg,
Yes.
Ms. Bays,
Yes. Sorry, that mute button. Yes.
Mrs. Brooks,
Yes.
Ms. Epstein,
Yes.
Ms. Gilliar,
Yes.
Mr. Greenstein.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Any old business? Any new business? Okay, now opportunity for community to be heard. We have received a couple of emails during the meeting, so now is the time we can read them into the record. I guess I can do the honors. Okay, first one that came in was from Megara Regan, and it says, this is Megara Regan, physical education teacher at Manor Haven Elementary School. I'm sending you this email since this appears to be the new way for community comments to be heard. I just want to provide you with a little background information before I continue. I served this past summer on various district and school-wide reopening committees and subcommittees. Some of the main priorities of these committees were to, 1, keep everyone safe, 2, keep schools open as much as possible, and 3, prepare staff and students to pivot seamlessly to remote learning when necessary. We all worked hard to get our schools ready, and I'm proud to have been a part of the process. With that said, I do have a few concerns and questions. 1, I am having a really hard time digesting the number of positive COVID cases that have just recently been reported. Saturday, January 2nd, 10 new cases. Sunday, January 3rd, 11 new cases. Today, and this is something that I mentioned in the beginning, January 5th, 20 new cases. This is a total of 41 cases in just 4 days. Am I the only one who finds this alarming? 2, I am honestly baffled by the fact that our district did not decide to pivot to remote teaching this week. I understand that other districts in our area chose to go back to school right after the break, but like I say to my kids all the time, just because someone else does something does not make it right. 3, the students and staff have been preparing for remote learning for months now. We are ready to do this if we need to. Personally, I love being in school with the kids, teaching them face-to-face. I do not particularly enjoy teaching PE through Google Meets, but I believe there are times when remote teaching is best and safest option for everyone. This week to me would have been one of those times. Please understand that I want what is best for the children and the staff, but these rising numbers are really terrifying. Is there a metric that the district is using to decide when to go remote? I am not normally an anxious person, but that is changing with each additional positive case reported. Thank you for your time, Megara Reagan. Okay. Thank you, Megara. Here is one from Jean Marie Levigny to the board and Dr. Shields and Dr. Meoli. Dr. Hines gave percentages for the graduation rates. What are the numbers? How many students are these percentages representing? Has the district tried to find out why there is a disparity in graduation rates? I find it hard to believe that our teachers and administrators do not have insight as to what the problem could be and what tools could be useful. Many people move out of the area prior to graduation. Is this accounted for in the numbers? And then there's a follow-up quoting the state numbers. Yeah, I have. Okay, I'm going to get to all of them. And here's what Ms. Levigny says. The actual numbers for the Hispanic population are 4-year, 96 students, 67.7% graduation rate, or 32 did not graduate. 5-year, 77 students, 81.8% graduation rate, or 15 did not graduate. And 6-year, 83 students, 85.5% graduation rate, or 13 did not graduate. Do these actual numbers constitute a large expenditure at this time, or can this be looked at internally first? How many of these students are those with special needs? There are too many questions. Okay, and I did almost skip this one, and I apologize, but I don't think the order matters. This one is also from a teacher, Joy. I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right, but Jaworski. Is that correct? Jaworski. Hello. Could you please explain your rationale of the board's repeated message, quote, schools are the safest place for students? Do you mean the school is the second safest place? Every doctor and specialist has stated that your home with your nuclear family is the safest place to avoid large gatherings. How is a large gathering of moving students and teachers in building with masks being on and off at times, rooms, surfaces, and bathrooms being shared safer than staying home? If windows open and masks are all it takes to stop the spread, then why are you not meeting in person? And you means the board. Why is the board not setting an example for the students and staff that the school is safe? Thank you for your time. And I do believe this is the final question. Yes, the final comment is from Rachel Garmisa, and it is Happy New Year. Are they discussing Wednesdays at Weber tonight? I don't know if, I mean, we have covered the Weber will be covered at the next meeting, Weber, Wednesdays at Weber. But as far as the safety concerns, I do think we discussed them, but I don't know if we want to, well, we could respond in a email form, I think, to those questions. But I do think that we covered that. Okay. Thank you, community, for your comments. Okay, our next meeting is January 19th. Yes, January 19th. And for those who want to put in the calendar, the one after that is February 9th. Okay, thank you, everybody, for participating and having a informative meeting. I appreciate it. We all do. And good night, and hope to see you at the various meetings that are coming up this week. Thank you.